We're in the Norwich Quarter here. It's really surprising, I guess, when you look at the neighbours. British Library, the Francis Crick Institute across the way. And I understand that this space is used not just as an office, but obviously as a place for conversation. And I hope that is what we're going to do today. When I think about AI, it does seem it's the conversation that everybody is talking about at the moment. I came from Lisbon last week, where I was moderating a panel on the AI stage. And that was by far the most popular stage at the whole event. Everybody was fascinated with what's going on in AI. And it's a very multi-layered conversation, because you've got at the top the sort of big societal questions about where we think AI is going to take us and how it could potentially help us with some of the really big challenges we face as society. Then you have the layer of the government, and I don't particularly envy this government having to unpick the various things it needs to unpick in terms of AI. Both, it's already committed to using AI and putting AI at the heart of government. We're not quite sure what that will mean in reality, but, you know, it could be an interesting way of saving a lot of money. But they've also got to grapple with regulation, and they've got to think about how they support AI businesses. And then you have the layer of business themselves, not only the kind of multitudinous AI startups that seems to be popping up almost on a daily basis, but you have more established businesses trying to work out how on earth they're going to integrate AI into their systems, having to wend their way through a lot of AI hype, AI washing, and work out which AI businesses and which AI systems are going to actually transform their businesses. And then at the very bottom of the conversation, although still very much a part of it, is us as individuals trying to work out exactly how we use AI. I know I've started using ChatGPT to help me with articles, to give me a sort of sense into something if I'm writing something, to kind of help summarize things, as I'm sure many of you do. But I haven't really ever used it to write the stuff for me yet. I don't think it's quite ready to do that, and I wouldn't want to do that because it would feel like a cheat. And so for me, I think it's quite an exciting tool to be using. But for a lot of people, it's quite a scary prospect. And I'm thinking about my kids, and who are both sort of on their university journeys, and where they may end up when it comes to AI and the jobs that they may choose. And going, my son's talking about finance, and I'm thinking, that's definitely going to be taken by AI. My daughter's more into animal conservation, wants to do zoology at university, and I'm like, actually, it's all human. Yes, go for that. That's not going to be taken by AI anytime soon. But I think we're all, as individuals, having these conversations with ourselves and with our families about, how it's actually going to affect our daily life. And I hope that we'll touch on some of those topics today as we talk with our illustrious panels that we've gathered here. And I think I want you to introduce yourself first of all, and we're going to actually start with a question that was asked as part of 3M's State of Science Insights survey, which found that 73% of individuals in the UK agree that AI will change the world as we know it. As I've just described, it could do that in many ways. When I first saw that stat, I thought that's not really surprising at all. But then when I thought about it, I thought actually it's quite incredible that we're all in a way, quite complacent about the fact that there's this technology which is completely going to change everything. And we all agree on that change. So I would like my panel, first of all, to introduce themselves and then to think about that question and unpick what they think that change is going to look like. Should we start with you, Paul?
Thank you very much. I'm Paul Cardno. I'm a global digital innovation leader at 3M. My focus is mainly in the marketing space and digital marketing. I think when we think about that kind of stat, changing the world, the amount of people who think it will, if you look at some research we did recently, 1/3 of workers in the workplace are already using AI every week. So we're not talking about something in the distant future here when we're talking about a change. We're talking about something that's already present, already impacting the way they work. And actually there's some similar research that came out from Wharton that said that most people's managers don't think they use AI. So there's a really significant disparity between these two spaces at the moment. that creates a challenge when it comes to safety, creates a challenge when it comes to observability, creates a challenge when it comes to authenticity to a degree. So I think it is going to have that huge change. I think we're already seeing it. And normally with technology, you get 5-10% of people at this stage adopting, and we're already in the 30s. So big changes to come, but really importantly, already here that we need to start adapting to already.
Fantastic. Sarah, brief introduction to who you are and then your thoughts on this big change that's coming. I think a big change indeed. So I'm Sarah Armstrong from the Microsoft team, and I lead our modern work and our generative AI business across much of Europe, Middle East and Africa. I'm hoping to bring some of the customer stories to you today on how our customers are adopting AI and what that change for them looks like tangibly. Wow, where do we start with the change? I would ask you to imagine being free from the mundane. I think being free to focus your mind on more creative, strategic, innovative tasks, on relationship building. Those are the things that's the opportunity that AI offers us, I think, and the change it will bring with it. Is actually not replacing people, but empowering people, allowing us to focus our minds on those higher value tasks. That's certainly the opportunity and the change. But I think I would also caveat that with careful consideration for the changes that means for the world. Both as an opportunity, how can we leverage AI to make the world and the environment a better place and to do some healing? But for society, how do we use AI to drive inclusiveness but make sure no one is left behind? And then what's the impact on jobs and skills, future jobs? What do those look like? So I think those are all changes that we as responsible leaders, and certainly at Microsoft, were committed to lean in and work through some of those debates. Fantastic. Hannah, introduce yourself and then conclude thoughts on change.
Absolutely. So I'm Hannah Russell. I'm Chief Executive at the British Science Association, and we are really pleased to be hosting today's event with our strategic partner, 3M. For anyone who doesn't know the British Science Association, we are a national charity. We've been around for just shy of 200 years. And at the heart of what we do and what we've always done really is a belief that all of society should be included in science. And so we work to bring people and science together in ways that will have, in meaningful ways that will have positive benefits for communities, for science, and for society. And so when I've been thinking about that stat, I think there's so much to unpick, and actually Paul and Sarah have already touched on some of the aspects, but I think one of the things for me is 73% of people think that AI will change the world. But of course, change can be both positive and negative. And I think you have to then dig into that stat. What are people really thinking? The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology published a report, I think back in February. And one of the questions within that, they asked people to sum up their views about AI in one word. And by far the most common word that was picked was scary, followed by worry and then unsure. And so we've got a job to do, I think, around public engagement with AI. I think the public do see benefits. There's been a quite recent report by AI at CAM, that's the University of Cambridge, looking at public services and people's perceptions of where AI can support public services. And definitely people can see benefits within that. But there are lots of things that people are worried about. They're worried about losing their jobs. They are worried about diversity within data. They're worried about security of data. And I think we can't ignore those things when we're thinking about all the, potentially exciting developments.
Well,
Hello. I'm Will Dunn. I'm the business editor of the New Statesman. The New Statesman is a spring chicken compared to the British Science Association. We've only been around for about 110 years, reporting on politics and culture since then. With help of writers like Virginia Woolf, George Orwell. Those guys don't write for us so much anymore. H.G. Wells. And I've been there for about 8.5 years. And before that, I was a technology journalist for 5 years. So I have probably spent most of my career listening to people tell me that they're going to change the world. But in the case of AI, it does feel quite different. because the potential of the technology is so huge, and it feels like something that everyone can see, and everyone can imagine examples, and everyone has, to a certain extent, started using it, especially over the last couple of years. I think sort of most journalists now would use an AI transcription program. I was using one just now. I think, as James said, most journalists also would not use AI to do their writing. Certainly no journalist on the New Statesman would do that. But so I think over the last couple of years, obviously, we've seen this huge boom in news stories and in investment related to this sudden public awareness of large language models. And I think possibly what we're going to see in the years to come is more of hopefully what we'll hear more about in a minute, more sort of real world examples that are away from the convincing use of language and towards businesses being able to use new products in different ways that make lots of different people more productive in different ways. And I think that will also be a key part of addressing that question of how people feel about AI adoption and to what extent it frightens them.
Yeah, I definitely want to get onto that because journalists love specific examples of things, don't they? Yeah. So they're going to absolutely have some visible. I think the audience will want to hear those too. But before we get to that, I want to sort of pick up on your point, Hannah, about the perception is scary. And I think in some ways, the press have sort of contributed to that. I mean, the press love a kind of nightmare scenario. They like illustrating AI stories with pictures of Terminator robot, headlines around, will this bring about the end of the human race? And always a little bit more interesting than perhaps the nitty gritty and the everyday mundanity of what it's doing right now. But what do we do to I suppose, shift public opinion away from that scary scenario, but also make sure that there's lots of voices involved in the conversation, because both things are really important, aren't they? And should we start with you, Han?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I trying to think where to start. So we, at the British Science Association, we are part of a program called ScienceWise, which is a public dialogue program. And we do quite a lot of work looking at public views about emerging technologies. And consistently, it almost doesn't matter what the technology is. The areas that people want to know about are who governs the technology, who benefits from the technology, and is the technology safe and secure? And people have worries on all of those counts with AI, which is why it's not surprising that people find AI quite scary. In terms of what to do, in terms of why we should engage the public on this, partly it's the right thing to do. AI is going to change people's lives and people's livelihoods. But I think there's two other really important reasons why we need to prioritize engaging the public. One is around public trust, because if we really want to increase public trust, then we need to hear some of those voices and not just the voices of people. It's fantastic to have everyone here today, but presumably we're all engaged in this conversation already in some capacity. So we need to reach out to communities who are not engaged with these discussions. But the other reason to do that is because actually when you bring together the public with researchers, that's when the magic happens. Actually, communities can often bring in insights into things that researchers just haven't thought about. That's partly because actually, as a sector, tech is not as diverse as it might be, and perhaps we'll get onto that later. But actually, bringing people into that conversation makes for better science and more thoughtful and more inclusive and more durable solutions. And so I think actually it's an economic imperative to bring the public in. It isn't just a nice to have.
Well, a lot of the public conversation happens in publications like yours, and I'm sure the New Statesman isn't going for the terrifying headlines that I've described. That's more Daily Mail territory, right? But how could we help make that conversation, and what do we need to really start talking about now? Because we've had 2 years of this technology almost sort of coming out of nowhere with Gen AI, and suddenly everybody kind of waking up, and people that haven't even thought about AI are suddenly very aware of it. Where do we need the conversation to sort of go next?
Well, I think it's very important to acknowledge those fears and discuss them publicly in a rational way. I'm obviously talking about the great value that the New Statesman brings to society there. But I mean, I think it's important but also to look at them and say, what are people really frightened of? There are the immediate practical considerations, which, by the way, don't just come from irresponsible headlines in the media. I mean, you do see reports from economists and think tanks that are often the source of those headlines. Recent one from the Tony Blair Institute, which talked about, I think, possible redundancies under one scenario peaking at, 250,000 redundancies a year. That's the kind of thing that journalists see and say, right, we really need to tell the public about that. That's in the public interest. And then, from the point of view of a publication like ourselves, there is also, I think what's interesting about AI is that you have, the public seem to be relatively comfortable with the uncanny valley, as it used to be called, especially when it applied to robots and automation. People seem to be taking to using chatbots and things like that quite comfortably. But I think there is also that philosophical question about AI, the sort of stochastic parrot debate that a lot of people talk about, and that, the extent to which AI might one day reflect on what it means to be alive and things like that. I think that is also a major contributor in the background to the way that people feel about it. And I think engaging people, don't just assume that people's concerns are solely immediate. I think it is a technology that brings in larger, more reflective questions. But I think also, there are, in the short term, I think moving on to sort of talking more about the gains from it and how it will make people in their individual roles more productive is absolutely key to getting the public to think about it in a more positive light.
And I guess that's a business.
Had perspective from Microsoft here. Privileged to be in my role working with hundreds, if not thousands, of customers on adoption of AI across the European area. And I think if you were to put a time-lapse camera in our customer briefing centers a year ago, there was excitement and skepticism. And then if you fast forward that 3 months, I think you would have seen a lot of fear. But now, when we're out with customers, what we're hearing is their 100 big ideas to transform their business. So yes, recognize everything that you've said, but I think the mood, certainly amongst business leaders, and the view of AI has certainly evolved a lot in the last year.
Wow. And is it worth now just giving some examples of some of that you're seeing? You say you're going out and you're seeing all this enthusiasm from customers. What are the sorts of things that they're either using AI for or wanting to use AI for in the future?
Yeah, it varies across the industry, and I think every industry, we see some great examples of AI being used. In 3M themselves, right? Better products, quicker to market, with a better customer satisfaction level. And that's driven at back then by AI. And like 3M, 85% of the Fortune 500 are using AI, Microsoft AI, to really help transform their business. I think it's there across every industry first. Let me talk about some of the statistics. There was a new IDC report published just a couple of weeks ago, actually, on the AI opportunity. And it talked about the use of AI in the workplace moving from 55% to 75%. So there's already been a huge shift in those statistics that we see. And what a business is getting out of that, to kind of finish the statistical story. And we're hearing from businesses and, very carefully managing outcomes. So we monitor the real impact for our customers. And they're seeing on average a 3.7x return on their investment for AI. And I'll give some examples in a moment. And that's across financial services. There's already high impact and high return. It's across media and telcos. It's across retail, energy, pharmaceutical, manufacturing. It really is touching all of our customers no matter which sector that they're in. And then, of course, what did, the companies that go all in see? And there is a difference. So the 3.7x return is an average for our customers.
when we're actually sampling results in our customers that have gone all in on AI, that multiplies up to 10.3 times return. So when you create big movement and when you embed AI not only in your workforce, but actually to transform your business processes, the return's huge. So what does that look like? And I think there are 3 levels very clearly in my mind that I see our customers working through. The first is around using AI for personal productivity. And a lot of debate is in that space at the moment. And it's around customer service, feeling a better customer service. And, that come back to my Imagine comment I started with. We're working with healthcare customers around the world, including in the UK. But they are actually reducing the time it takes to create and process a medical report for doctors from 1 hour to 15 minutes. Imagine the reduction in waiting times. Barnsley City Council has been using generative AI to equip their social workers to go out and spend more time face-to-face with families. Imagine less children at crisis point. Manufacturers like Unilever, legal companies like Clifford Chance, they're using AI to really lift the burden of admin from their employees and put them into higher value tasks. So imagine the things that brings in happier customers. Then there's a second level up, which I think is a maturity step, where businesses are actually embedding AI to achieve business value and transform their business process. And now let me give you some examples of customers we have like Sainsbury's, who actually are reimagining the online shopping experience, but also doing smart shelf replenishment. Okay, imagine the impact of the top 9. Then we've got companies like Vodafone, who've talked publicly about taking an hour off every contract that they process. Imagine the bottom line efficiency. And then you've got companies like Siemens moving out of this, moving to the third level of maturity, which is really about these business processes weren't built with AI capabilities in mind. How do we reimagine that? How do we ideate? How do we iterate? How do we build products quicker to market that are better products with a higher customer satisfaction at the end of them? And that's that transformation level. But I think, my closing point is it brings with it a challenge. Businesses need a strategy. They need a strategy on data security, on privacy and compliance, on where they're going to buy AI to achieve economies of scale and benefit from the rapid development cycles companies like ours are going through in bringing those products to market. But actually, where do they build their own for high bespoke needs? And of course, skills. 65% of business leaders say they don't have enough AI skills in their employee population to really enable that transformation. And that's something that we're also leaning into with our customers, training 17 million people in the last 12 months on digital skills, but making a pledge last December to invest in skilling 1 million people in the UK alone with skills to fuel that AI economy. So I think the benefits are real, but business value is there. Microsoft are making some announcements later today, so do watch the press on this. But some proven points around marketing organizations able to double lead conversion to opportunity and 40% more closed sales as a result of adoption of AI. So it is having impact today. That's already here. Okay, Paul, what would you say from a business perspective the conversation needs to be about? We heard there about efficiencies, but also concerns around how you implement it, data, skills. Where would you think that businesses need to start when they're having these conversations?
So it's a really key point of all of this, really. There's a huge amount of benefit that we're able to get hold of through AI, but making sure we're doing it in a responsible way with the appropriate governance, the appropriate regulatory frameworks to support that's going to be really crucial for us. And we know when we look at the UK, we're still waiting a bit for some of that regulation to come out. We've seen real progress in the US, in China, in the EU, and the UK are, I think, let's just say, getting ready for that to come out. We know that as companies, certainty is what we like. So we like to know where we're investing and that the regulatory frameworks are going to support that. And great governance allows us to move faster and be more innovative because it gives us the space we can operate in well. So when I look at that kind of counterbalance of that growth, a key part there for me is really twofold. You've got it's got the big showy side. You've got those foundational, the people who are creating AI for the world that are really moving in those spaces. And there is a lot of governance and regulation that's going to be needed there to make sure we've got the right ethical boundaries, we've got the right controls over bias, copyright, all of those kind of things. But on the other side, then you have a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, exactly the types you've talked about, who are, let's call them enterprise consumers of AI instead. And that's where there's another space where regulation and governance is going to be so important to us, because we need to know if we're using AI to develop new products, if we're using it to get the kind of gains that we're seeing in marketing organizations like the one I'm a part of, that what we're producing is protected, it's safe, it has a degree of intellectual property protection around it. So there's a lot of multifaceted bits where, to be honest, what we're not looking for is things to be clamped down on. We're looking for clarity. And when we have that clarity, we can accelerate and we can really drive forward with these kind of operations and make sure we're doing things that are right for people, right for our investors, right for our shareholders, and right for our customers.
Thank you. I think that regulation question is one we should all think about a little bit. It's always the boring side, isn't it? Regulation,
Thanks.
But it's always something we've got to consider. And I think the government has a really difficult job on its hands, because it's stuck between a rock and a hard place in some ways, isn't it? Because it's seen what's happened in the EU, and a lot of the tech companies have said that it's overregulated to the extent that they're throwing their toys out the pram and saying, well, we won't offer AI products in Europe if you're going to regulate us to that degree. So, you've got this government looking at that and thinking, well, we don't necessarily want to sort of follow that sort of strict regulation. But on the other hand, they've got kind of to balance the needs of companies and make sure that there is different regulation for different aspects of AI. So AI isn't one standard thing fits all, is it? So how do they go about kind of making a decision when we've got driverless cars, Gen AI? They couldn't be more different, but they will be put under an umbrella of AI. But what would your sort of advice be to the government when it comes to regulation? Anybody else wants to jump in?
I can give a little bit of a sort of societal perspective. Yeah. I guess for me, in generating regulation, the two key things I'd want to think about would be transparency and inclusion. So transparency is around that sort of open communication. We were talking earlier, Paul, about reproducibility, those sorts of things. And I think that's important, again, in coming back to that trust question. And then inclusion, there are various ways in which, again, you can engage the public as part of that policy process. You can do public dialogues where you can actually bring members of the public together with subject experts and policymakers, and collectively then they can chew over, what might be the unintended consequences of this piece of regulation. And I think that's going to lead to regulations that are more inclusive and durable, hopefully without stifling innovation. Because I agree, it's got to be that balance that protects society, but allows innovation to flourish.
Yeah.
And just jumping to there as well, that when we really all started moving into this generative AI space, as most people did about 2 years ago, there wasn't some of the regulation in place, but that doesn't mean you can't put great governance in place within organizations themselves. So I remember sat in February last year drafting our first guidelines for all of our marketing organization with some of our lawyers. And we sent something out to everybody we knew saying, let's just be careful about this, be safe. This is what we know we can do. This is what we know we can't. So there's always a space for organizations in lieu of regulation to make sure that they're being responsible, because it's just about managing risk. So it's all about risk management for us. So in that case, that's where within 3M, we invested in our own internal AI platform built on Microsoft and OpenAI's technology to be able to bring it to people so that all of our employees had access to their own AI assistant, which we call 3M Navigator. But they can do it in a way that we can observe what's going on. We make sure it's being used safely. We have guidelines on not putting certain information in there. So it doesn't always involve regulation, but it certainly helps when it's there and makes it clear for us, because responsible use is the responsibility of our organizations as well.
Yeah, I think when you bring
products to the world that change the world and the impact that AI does, and those technologies are certain hopefully contributing in that space, you have to come with as of responsibility. And we have a responsible AI policy at Microsoft that everything is governed by. So it's principles, not just of privacy and compliance, safety and security, but actually on trust, on transparency, on doing the right things. And I think big businesses need to have that role in not just following rules that are set for them, but in stepping forward as responsible leaders involved in this transformation and doing something about that ourselves. And I think that's what a responsible AI strategy in Microsoft does. It's also, of course, about security. You bring those products to market. How do you make sure that they're secure by design? That's something we believe passionately in, and it's been on a lot of the media lately. But also, when we're using AI ourselves at Microsoft, we're secure by default, automated settings set to protect end users, to protect data, to really the compliance. So we have a role to play as well. Well, I've spoken to a couple of business leaders recently, and they said some quite radical things about maybe you just need to strip the technology out of regulation and not think about AI first, but think about some of the issues. And they use the example of driverless cars, where actually the regulation so far has been around safety and just expanding the rules and not really focusing on the technology. Is that the way you think regulation should go, or do you have other ideas?
I think, well, as you said right at the beginning, I certainly don't envy this government either, partly because later today I'll be joining thousands of farmers who are popping down Whitehall to go and shout at them. But also, it's all right, Keir Starmer's not there, who's in the G20, so he'll be right. But it is an extremely difficult question, especially in Britain, because you also have, who knows which way regulation will head in the US. You've got sort of Elon Musk is, on the one hand, extremely committed to deregulation across the US government, but he's also quite concerned about, AGI and things like that. So who knows where. And then you have a quite different regulatory approach in the EU. And so the government is going to have to decide whether or not it will pick a side or whether it will try to create a position for Britain in which, we offer sort of kind of better both worlds to companies, whereby they can develop products more quickly and more safely, than either, the quicker side or the safer side. So it could be an interesting position, but probably a very difficult one to reach. And that decision would not be without implications for our relationships with either side of the Atlantic as well. But I do think, to your question, often the approach, successful regulation is not always that direct. So we've seen the extremely slow government regulation with regards to things like e-commerce and social media, but then sometimes the thing that ends up being more effective will be something else within the tax system that allows the playing field to be leveled between, say, high street businesses and online retailers. So I think you're right to say it's important to think of this not as solely we look at this thing, which is also quite a diffuse thing and could be several different technologies, but we regulate for its effects or for its anticipated effects.
And I wanted to move on and talk a bit about innovation. This is another thing that government has got to think about, how it kind of supports British businesses that are looking to innovate. And I just wanted to hear from each of you where you thought the greatest innovation was coming from for both established businesses, but also in the startup scene. If there's areas that you're particularly excited about or changes that you're seeing in business that you really think that you'd really like to share with the audience, who would like to start?
Yeah, there's lots of potentially exciting areas. I think for me, two areas that I'm particularly interested in, because they are areas that the young people that we work with tell us time and time again are the areas they are most interested in, are around climate tech and around medicine. So not just diagnostics and drug discovery and accelerating that pathway, but even from a sort of public health perspective. And our president this year is Professor Kevin Fenton, who's a world-leading epidemiologist and public health expert. And he was talking at an event recently around, imagine a situation where actually for the public where the vaccination records for people's children might be on an app. Could that make it actually easier for parents to be able to access vaccines? There are all sorts of reasons why people don't access vaccines, but one of the reasons just might be actually, how do you keep track of when your children are due for each vaccine? And actually having that in your arsenal feels like a really small thing that might make a tangible difference within public health. So I think there's, potentially really exciting developments in the very areas that the people, I keep touching my microphone, sorry, apologies, the very areas that we know that the public care a lot about.
I would have gone with this. Actually,
sorry.
But, let me share my personal passion for the impact this can have across the public sector and the services that they bring to us. So I'm from a family of public sector workers. My mom was a nurse, my dad was a firefighter, my brother is a policeman. I myself started my career as a teacher in North London. So I'm really passionate about some of the scenarios we've seen in health. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about, which industry and where do we see the impact, healthcare. But that's something that will touch all of us, not just from getting access to a GP and to get an appointment, but, the referral time reduced. And then actually the country investing its money very much in preventative care, not treating advanced stage cancer as an example. That's good for all of us. That's good for us as a country. Pharma, I agree. Life sciences is a really exciting space what we do with AI. And you've talked about some of the examples there. But I would add it's also about the talent in those markets that are today underserved. So when I talk to a lot of our customers who went very early in pharmaceuticals across Europe, and you ask them why, and it was about enhancing the employee experience to attract the best talents. A proof point we're going to be talking about later today, but in some of our announcements, but also Forrester has published an impact on, is up to 20% impact on talent retention. So 20% less people leaving companies when they're empowered to use AI and to do great work. That's a very meaningful statistic for the UK when you look at attracting talent to our markets and to key industries, especially in science. So yes, there are examples on what AI is doing in health and pharma, but actually the impact across the board from a talent acquisition retention point of view is something worth considering. It always makes me laugh that when people talk about DeepMind, often they think about the games of chess and Go that it's played, but the real breakthrough for DeepMind has been AlphaFold, which has been utterly transformational for biology. But I think, I know I as a journalist didn't write about it much because I really didn't understand how it worked. It was too difficult for me to explain. But yeah, we're seeing some massive breakthroughs in healthcare. Other areas, Paul, that you're interested in? I know the green economy is something.
Hannah touched on it. It's a really key part for us. If we think of the world that we all live in, it gets more and more complex every day. And usually when something like AI comes along, it's like, oh, it's just got even more complex today. Brilliant. But actually, if we think of a lot of the jobs that are coming through in the future, particularly around within large companies, within large economies, the amount of data, the amount of information that we're going to be expecting people to be able to work with is absolutely enormous. Like if you look at, to take an example, like for the 3M supply chains for one of our products, command strips, our CEO said in one of our investor calls that that strip goes through 5 manufacturing facilities and 2 warehouses before it reaches the customer. Okay, make it go through 1 and 1. Yeah, but there's a whole interconnected network of things that are going on there. And when you start looking at where AI can come into that in terms of predictive modeling, being able to work through, well, if we pull this, does something over there fall over? All of that stuff's really, really important. And when I look at how we reskill people within our existing organizations, that's a challenge. We look at big technology that's come through the years as to whether it was maybe organizational resistance around mobile or how we upskilled people 25 years ago into using the internet. There's a big societal change there and people existing in the workforce. But then we've got to look at who's coming into that workforce going forward. There's a phrase gets used a lot about digital natives. Well, here's the AI native generation that's coming through. But crucially, a lot of the people coming through into employment may not even know they're using AI. Like 2 years ago, when we all popped into ChatGPT for the first time, we knew we were doing it. Okay, maybe slightly less than 2 years, 2 years and a couple of weeks minus that. We all knew we were doing it. We were going there going, what does this thing do? It's a blank screen. What do I do? And then you're seeing at the moment a lot of AI is embedded where you are. So you might be using LinkedIn to write a post and it'll make it shorter, better, smarter, make me seem cleverer than I am. But we're going to have an awful lot of people who are out there using AI and they don't even know it. So how do we help that when we're thinking about upskilling in the future, that people who are coming into the workforce, they know where they've been using AI, they've got tools they can use to do it so that they can help us take on some of the challenges of the really complex world we live in right now. So I think that for me, arming people coming in already in industry to be able to take on those complex challenges that a spreadsheet isn't going to cut it anymore is really crucial.
And maybe we'll come to skills next, but I just want to go to Will before we move on to that question. Now, you said you're going to meet the farmers later. The farmers, not all of them probably, but farming and AI is, the way AI is potentially transforming the farming. Is that something you're excited about, or are there other areas that you see?
I mean, I think, like, as you say, AlphaFold was this incredibly exciting and justifiably prize-winning development. And I think we will probably see more advances like that where machine learning is used to kind of not exactly brute force the problem of, going through lots and lots of different iterations of things, but it's able to just sort of do that much faster. And I think, things like material sciences, when we think about what a significant development and academic achievement it was, the discovery of graphene and how to synthesize graphene, but sort of that many times over, you think about the difference that having new materials has made to our world. We name ages of human civilization after our ability to make different materials. So I think there's massive potential there that people perhaps aren't talking about that much. The other thing that particularly interests me is the way in which humans organize themselves, obviously as somebody who writes a lot about politics as well as business. And there's a piece that I wrote a few years ago, which occasionally is discovered by a new group of young online socialists and goes home again, and about how the first person you should automate, the first role you should automate in your organization is the CEO, because strategy should be made in a dispassionate manner, and it should be possible for all the employees in the company to question that strategy without them having to worry about the effect it might have on their job prospects and their interpersonal relationships with the boss and things like that. So, sort of automate your whole C-suite. Why not get rid of all the senior executives? But what we kind of see at the moment, I think, is a lot of companies assuming that tasks should be automated from the ground up. And some of those are quite risky, by the way, things like customer service. If you're automating that, then, that like you need to be really sure it works. Whereas like single strategic decisions, everyone can question them. And they'll take longer to implement. So why not, have that done by the machine and not? Anyway, so I think those sorts of questions, things like how do the roles, sort of not just regulation, but how do organizations like unions get involved? And I think there is a lot of very inventive thinking going on there. At places like the Oxford Martin School, where economists are thinking about how this might reshape the way in which people work together, and that could be really exciting.
Can I add on your farming tone of the moment, story of the moment, and just to share an example on how we see AI impacting how farm, to food gets to us as consumers. And we were engaged in supporting a project, an AI-driven project called Sherpa, that assessed the carbon emissions and the impacts
for all the ingredients going into various food sources, really to track the carbon footprint of a food product as it landed with you and I on the shelf in Sainsbury's or Waitrose or wherever you shop. And actually, when we looked at the impact, we did the assessment, we saw that producing batches of microwave lasagnas was equivalent in emissions to powering half of London. So that's to think about when you're having your microwave and lasagna for tea tonight. But when AI come into that, it was very much, how do we drive efficiency in that food chain and in that supply chain so that we drive down those emissions? That's going to help us, certainly as a society, but maybe also the good news for the farmers, right? And how they can certainly contribute in this area.
Okay, I think we're near the end. So we didn't get on to the topic of skills, which is obviously a really important one, and diversity. So feel free to talk about that in your summation. But I'd also like to hear from you in a sentence, what one change you think will have the greatest impact on the UK's AI and innovation landscape? A nice easy one to end.
I think the change will be regulatory in the short term, because I think, like I said, the government does have this big decision to make about which side it chooses and whether or not it can find that middle path. And the noises coming out of the government so far are very much towards, talking about regulators in terms of, economic growth being almost the sole priority of this government. So I think it will go more towards the faster innovation side. But that, I think, could be particularly transformative.
Should I go next?
Yes, please.
I'm still thinking about your comments about CEOs. And
I think we are.
Yeah, well, I'm quite looking forward to putting my feet up when my role is automated. For me, actually, the biggest change is that one that we haven't touched on, I think, which would be the diversity and supply of talent and skills. I think it's absolutely fundamental to AI. Just to sort of put it in perspective, about 1.6 million people work in tech in the UK, and it's just not as diverse as it needs to be. The vast majority, it was really lovely to hear about Catapult supporting across the UK, but we know that the majority of tech is in London and the South East. Just 21% of people working in tech are women, and that's just not enough. There are all sorts of other diversity issues. The one that always really gets me is the fact that there's only 11% of people with disabilities working in tech against 14% of the UK workforce. And I just think if any sector should be supporting with people with disabilities, surely that should be tech. So there is stuff to do. And that is right through the education system as well. We need to make sure there's greater recognition of the value of skills, including technical skills, but skills more broadly all the way through the education system. We need to put in place strategies really to build that more diverse pipeline, but also to look at retention when people get into the workforce. Are we keeping them? And I think that if we can address that challenge, that's what's going to make the biggest change for me.
I think we've got some questions about that as well, so hopefully we can return to that. So the one thing that's going to impact AI and innovation and taskmaster now, Jane. One thing. No, I would have picked on skills for sure.
Sorry.
I would have picked green energy. But for me, as a business leader, my call to action, or the one thing that needs to change, is we need to mobilize now. So now is the time for business leaders to really have an understanding of AI can impact their business, can drive that transformation, and actually accelerate the pace of that and the scale of that AI adoption for good. The UK economy needs it. I think it will bring us growth. I think it will bring us global competitiveness. So my call to action for those people who sit in my seat is the time to act. I think is now if we're going to realise that potential. That's it. Paul.
I've talked about it a little, so I'm going to go back to it again. I think in the governance side, great governance lets us go faster, makes us safer, makes us more secure in what we're doing. And if we have that right framework, we're going to go all the way from early stage companies like the Digital Catapult supporting, knowing that the products that they're generating can be sold around the world because they have regulatory compliance that works. You have companies like ours knowing that we can leverage it safely to grow what we do in the country, to grow our impact on the economy, to deliver new products, new jobs, new ways of working. And then if we can do that in a way that is secure and safe for people, so that if you're using it, if you know my company, this company I'm buying from is using AI, you know that we can be clear with you on what we're using it for. And then back to areas we know around in the past, online advertising, things like that, where people get reticent about things. If we can give that safety, security, we're going to see people engageable. With all of that positioned, that drives the case for skills development, because we know we've got an economy that's going to grow, a particular industry that we can specialize in with just an academic powerhouse in the UK that can drive through to really well-connected businesses, many global businesses that are hubbed right here in the UK.
Sorry for calling regulation boring as well.
It's all right, it is. Reading it is, the results of it are.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to go to some questions from Slido. We've got about 20 minutes. We've got loads of questions here already. So actually, one of the things that we didn't talk about when we kind of summed up how we thought AI was going to impact society was climate change. And one of our questions is around that. So what are the panelists' thoughts on AI's impact on climate change and the huge power needed to see widespread adoption of AI? Because we've got a real contradiction here, haven't we? AI consumes vast amounts, but at the same time is already offering solutions by reading vast amounts of data and predicting weather. So we're in a slightly complex environment with that. But does anybody want to take on the question of climate change and AI?
I'm happy to. I think a key part of it is going to be balance, like you say. There are clear benefits of AI and what it's going to allow us to do in, like I mentioned, around green jobs, around making sure that we can adapt to the challenges of climate change. But with that said, with any new technology that's emerging, it's always quite consumptive to begin with. If you look at most technologies, they start that way, but then the key thing is making sure that there's a framework that puts in place the incentives to make it less consumptive, to make it smaller, to make it more effective and more efficient. Because again, that's where looking at kind of areas we want to invest, we want to see the UK invest in those kind of technologies about how can we reduce water consumption, we know is a key part, not just power. So balancing that the right way of investing in how we make it more efficient, because let's be frank, a lot of this technology is really early stage stuff. If there wasn't billions of dollars of investment behind it, a lot of it would still be living in labs rather than consumer products already on your phone. So we're seeing that stage that we need to catch up where that kind of scaling work goes on, and there's a lot of companies investing there. So I think there's a good balance to be had, but our responsible use of it is we only use AI where we can't solve a problem any other way. We're not using AI to solve simple things, we're using it to solve only the complex stuff. Because if we can solve complex, simple things other ways, we will. So it's not the solution for everything, but be responsible and invest in making it more economic.
Build on top of that, Adam. Look, I think there's a response. We're not yet clear on what the impact on climate change, on sustainability issues will be of AI. And Microsoft are actually investing in research so that we understand that better. And as I talked about with the Sherpa project, actually, you're getting better at doing that job. And so that's one side, we need to research the impact. But you're right, there is a trade-off. So how do we invest in projects to fix the planet? Sherpa and others, we've partnered with Met Office, really good partnership and collaboration with the government from our perspectives on building the biggest supercomputer to predict climate change and weather pattern change with far-reaching impact, not just in the UK, but globally. And actually, that's a really good, philanthropic thing to do, if you like. But actually for the UK, it brings £13 billion of potential economic growth with it and really creates jobs in data science and, environmental research. So I think we need to know what it is and we need to invest in projects that are going to change for good. But I think companies like Microsoft
also see our responsibilities in driving our own efficiencies. I was sharing at the coffee break and the environmental impact of data management and data storage, we all know is a pressing challenge for us. How do we move away from magnetized storage, which erodes quickly, needs to be replaced, and increases energy cost or environmental cost? So actually, Microsoft is innovating with storing data behind layers of cores. Why? Because it doesn't erode. So you don't have all the environmental burden of refreshing, moving that data, recreating that data, storing and managing, looking after that, and the impact it has. So I think there are projects like that we're really committed to. Waste management, and it is one, water management is another. So zero waste, positive water, and carbon negative, that's our ambition. And did Microsoft do an experiment with our undersea data center as well a couple of years ago? Well, I don't know. We're doing lots of innovation experimentation, but there is a report that people can look at that's our environmental impact report that's published annually. There are actually some really great statistics along with our commitment. We want to be a leader, for we are a leader in this space, but there are some great statistics and examples of projects, probably like the one that you mentioned in that report.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a different question. Now, this is quite a good one. If 73% of people think AI will change the world, what about the 27% of people who think it won't? How do we engage them in this revolution? Have any thought for that?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. I think, again, we all, because we're all engaged with this topic, we sort of assume that everyone will be, and that's just not true. So there are a number of different ways in which you can engage the public, and as journalists, you'll know that from the perspective of the British Science Association, we tend to focus particularly hard on reaching communities who are typically underrepresented in science and technology. And the three main ways in which we do that, one is through sort of national campaigns. So we run British Science Week every March, and that's an opportunity. Hopefully all of you engage with British Science Week in some way. And if you don't already, then please do speak to myself or one of the team before you leave today to find out how you can. But that's an opportunity to showcase cutting edge technology and some of the diversity of roles and people working in those roles. Then there are opportunities you can give people to roll up their sleeves and get involved in something that feels particularly relevant to them. So we know a third of young people aged 14 to 18 don't think that science is relevant to their lives. Only 8% of young people aged 14 to 18 can think of a scientist who looks like them. That's a massive problem for us. Some of those people are the people who don't think that this is going to change the world. So you need to find a way to reach people in a way that feels really relevant. So whether that's through education, we run the Crest Awards, which is an opportunity for young people to ask a question and explore it for themselves in a way that feels really relevant. But we also work with grassroots community groups to do something very similar, where they get to ask a question that feels particularly relevant to their community, whether they are refugees or survivors of domestic abuse or heart attack survivors. Think about what are questions that are particularly relevant to them. And then we partner them with researchers who can help them to explore it. And then the third way is, well, we've already sort of talked about that sort of public dialogue. But I think between those ways, you're showcasing the cutting edge technology, you're showcasing some of the fantastic applications, but really engaging people on their own terms. And I think for me, that's really at the heart of this. You can't assume people will come to you. You've got to go to people where they are.
I think Gen AI in the workplace is also, we could call it democratizing AI, in that it's been the first tangible touch when many workers or employees have directed AI to what they want to do. I'm thinking of the product, the Cardno Microsoft Copilot. It's a very knowing use of AI instead of being in a chatbot experience or understanding its use for research. And I think the aha moment is coming. As people use it and we shift away from, hey, create me an image of a frog dancing on the moon wearing ballet slippers. My mind is a wonderful place, by the way. How can I actually use that to help me do something more meaningful at work. So I think, if we look at the population in work, that aha moment is coming. We've moved away from gimmicks to really how does this free me up to make more of a contribution.
I think also what that stat tells you perhaps is that, some people don't watch the news. Some people don't even read the New Statesman. They should. It's the best magazine in the country. It's very affordable. But people aren't necessarily, if it doesn't affect their life and it doesn't affect their job now, they don't really have a vested interest in learning about it now. And one of the things that we've seen about technological development in the past 20 years, one of my favorite graphs, you're lucky I haven't brought it with me, so you don't have to look at this boring graph. But to me, it's very interesting because it shows a series of bubbles that show the change in price and things in the inflation basket over the last 20 years. And what's surprising about it is that some things, a handful of things, have got much, much cheaper. Things like the way in which the ONS puts it is a bit weird, but it's things like sort of data processing or like taking photos and things like that. Basically things your smartphone does. But what hasn't happened is, which we might have expected to see happen, is that hasn't necessarily made other parts of things in the inflation basket cheaper. So what hasn't happened, which we might have expected to happen, is the productivity gains in one sector spilling over into other sectors. And I think that's why people in certain walks of life and in certain jobs and industries feel left behind by technological advance in that sense. And that possibly also behind that statistic is that they don't feel engaged in the narrative that it will change the world, because technological advances have not really changed the world for them as much as we might think they have in recent decades.
I think there are things we can do as well. So later today, you'll hopefully all see lots of announcements coming out of our Microsoft Ignite conference, which is our annual conference for customers and partners, around agents. And we've already been vocal in what we're moving towards as Microsoft. So taking users who are potentially using that Gen I today and sitting an agent at their desk with them, see a virtual AI agent at their desk with them that will prompt them, I see you're doing this task. Can I help you? So it's actually helping people step into use of AI in meaningful situations. And we've got some really exciting announcements being made later about that.
Interesting. Now, we said at the beginning that we were going to try and give you some specifics, and these are two very specific questions. First, one to you, Paul. You talked about everyone at 3M having access to Navigator, an AI assistant. Can you share examples of how different teams are using it and the benefits that they're seeing?
Yep. So Navigator is kind of our own front end on the OpenAI services provided by Microsoft. So we built it specifically to make sure that we had compliance. We were keeping tabs on what people were doing to a degree. So the kind of things we see is definitely that personal productivity assistant. So I'll just give really personal examples, to be honest. The person I sit next to, she uses it to help construct emails, particularly when it's going to people she doesn't know. I have a member of my team based in Japan who, when he's putting emails together to go across to the team in the US, actually often asks it to rewrite. His English is perfect, but he asks for things to be written in a way that will culturally land a little better, and things like that. And it's really made a difference in some of those personal productivity spaces. But where we've gone beyond that is where we've also then gone into some of the custom development that we've done. So, for example, we built some technology that helps us rewrite product content on a website. Our transportation business are now doing more in a month than they used to do in a year. And in that process, what we're seeing is we're getting 25% more engagement on the website, so a quarter more people clicking through to find out more information. But my favorite bit is the people who use it are so much happier, because the job that they used to do was always one that was a bit at risk, because the volume, the work we could get through wasn't that much, because it was taking a long time to do all of this work. Actually, what they're seeing is, well, I'm doing 10 times the amount of work that I used to do. It's going much better. The results that we're seeing are better, and I'm enjoying it more because I'm not having to do a lot of the kind of nuts and bolts stuff I was doing. So There's definitely a place, in fact, a huge place for the kind of generalized assistant, which is what we've developed for nowadays for. But then when you go beyond that, you see into your own into the business operations, that's when we start to transform how we work, how we engage with customers.
Thank you. There's a question here which is quite dear to me because, like you, Sarah, I used to be a teacher briefly before I entered the tech industry, and this is about education. What have been conversations being had around the need for engaging primary age children in order to embed innovative thinking in the future? It does feel to me education hasn't changed significantly in about 100 years, and we definitely do need to think about that, not just for primary children, but for every age. Hannah, would you like to take on that question? What should we be doing?
And primary education is really close to my heart. And I think when you take our Press Awards, we start those at age 3, all the way through to 18. And it's that ability to ask a question on something that really interests you, roll up your sleeves, and then investigate it for yourself or working as part of a team.
And that's what real science and innovation is about. And I think we're not currently great for a number of reasons. And I don't want this to be a sort of blaming the teachers. So, teachers have an enormous number of barriers to face. At a primary level, 95% of primary teachers don't have a background in science. That makes it quite challenging. There's a lot of content to get through. Confidence is an issue, time is an issue, resources are an issue. And the more that organisations like the British Science Association, but working with partners like 3M to support teachers in primary schools, and particularly in schools in challenging circumstances who can't afford to buy in all of those resources for themselves, the more we can give young people an opportunity actually just to try things out, to be innovative and to spark that creativity, because they are going to be our future. We've got to sort out the workforce we've got, but those kids are going to be our future workforce.
And Microsoft has a long history of investing in skills of children, from digital girls into more modern initiatives where we're bringing AI skills to primary children in a fun and engaging way. But let me just share with you, I don't think it's just about AI skills, and this is a personal view. And I talked about aha moments earlier of coming. My aha moment as a technology-phobic school teacher in North London on the border of Wembley was very much a day like today. One wet play day, my children came in and said to me, I need to learn to program a macro. No, but you don't need to learn to program macro. I do, because then we can do quizzes and test each other on what you've been teaching us during the wet breaks. For me, it was a revolutionary moment in the value I placed on technology, because I saw my students go from answering my questions to posing their own. That's a fundamental shift in a higher order thinking skill. It's not just AI skills for primary children, it's higher order thinking skills so that we build that competitive workforce of the future. That's also where we need minds.
Agreed entirely. Now, I think I have one more question, and I'm going to go with the most popular question, which is around how should business leadership address the anxiety of the workforce concerning AI and turn it into excitement?
I think it has to start with the positive stories that we're already seeing. Every workplace is a community, or it's many communities of smaller communities within there. And the way that you drive that trust is those communities talking to each other. I work for a really big company, but I kind of see myself as a small community of the people that I work with in my work groups and things. So as we see positive stories around AI coming out, around our individuals who are using them, or how we're changing processes and the way that we work, I think that, and demonstrating that our leadership's investing in that, is a super important part to get to. Because there is that risk. There's always, am I going to be automated? Is my job going to disappear? The kind of example I gave earlier on about our copywriters adding more value now, there's always a challenge around how we develop our own skills. I think when we look at AI kind of as the follow-on, let's say, from the internet and Google, and as the next phase of that big technology revolution, there's never been a better opportunity for people to educate themselves. So if we have companies then putting that funding into education for their employees as well, we can make sure our best asset actually gets better. Because it costs a lot of money to rehire people. And as you said, the 20% extra retention rate that you see when people are getting access to things like AI, it's a really important part. Let's develop the people we've got and show them that by using AI, they can be even more productive and deliver more value.
So at Microsoft, is there anxiety or is there excitement? I don't think there's anxiety anymore. I mean, the way Microsoft bring services to market, technologies to market, is that we try them ourselves first. We call it our customer zero story. So 2 years ago, we all adopted, Gen AI and the work Copilot tips. So I don't think there's the fear or anxiety. I think there's still adoption curve to go through for sure. I think most Microsoft people now would be power users of Copilot. And, I see statistics where people are talking about incredible studies, talking about 50% faster time to insights. And actually, I would say in my own experience, having used it for maybe a year more than many other people in the workplace, that's actually much higher. So, with the way we use Gen AI, I think is important for a business leader to understand so they can bring it to their employee base. I do think business leaders, to answer your question, have got two really important roles. One is at the very top, how do you shape a responsible AI strategy? And others online for people to look at. But that's about that privacy, it's about the security, it's about transparency and accountability. That's really important for business leaders to set the foundations and the guardrails. That's very important. But when I'm out there with my customers, I have a great debate with some customers in Sweden last week around the role of leadership in driving their aha moments. And indeed, I was talking to some audience earlier about this. We see 3 components of successful rollouts of Gen AI in the workplace. One is the training and adoption, sustained training, making sure that you embed and change work habits. But the third thing is leadership communication. It's the bigger picture. It's the why. It's the business what we'll do for our company and the impact that has on our customers, whether that be economic impact, societal impact, whatever it looks like, but it's a reason. That's really important. And the third, as you talked about, is building communities. Business leaders creating safe communities that can build momentum to unlock those higher value scenarios.
And you started off by talking about the word scary for the public, but there'll be plenty of people in the workforce that are a little bit scared, especially if AI is being imposed on them. So what can their bosses do to make them feel more comfortable about this tech?
That's why I was going to start by saying, well, obviously we're a much smaller organisation than 3M or Microsoft, but actually maybe that's interesting to raise that in its own way. As a charity, we're not a tech company, so we're at an early stage of navigating this for ourselves. I would say our staff team are very enthusiastic about using AI, and for us that sort of thinking through the governance side of things, making sure we work with we have a lot of personal data. We work with a lot of young people, with communities, making sure that data is safe is an absolute prerogative for us. And making sure we've got the governance that gives people confidence that data is safe, and also then providing the support for people to be able to use the right systems safely.
Well, for journalists, we both said, we're starting to use these tools and we're kind of using them as and when we feel like it's not really being imposed on us. But within that world, are you seeing people quite excited about what the tools can do?
I think within journalism in particular, I think it's, that it's interesting in that there are certain things like the sort of repetitive strain injury inducing work of transcribing long phone calls with people, which it can take off you, and that's great. And I think that they're very, very widespread, like from the ground up adoption by individual journalists of those technologies. And I think I think more generally there is, depending on the publication, there is sort of skepticism over, what the suits might be thinking in terms of what it can do, sort of what it can, how much writing it could do, for example. And I think that is illustrative of industry more broadly, and how, what business leaders need to think about in terms of how their employees will feel about adopting these technologies. I think you need to be really transparent and really honest with people and tell them, if we are going to automate these parts of what we're doing, here is how we will train you to use these tools, and here is how we will allow you to do the parts of your job, like, going out and wandering around in a crowd full of angry farmers and asking them things, and, that can't be automated. So such that you can do the fun, interesting, sort of more human parts of your job more, and do the RSI stuff less. So, and I think it's not about necessarily selling it to your employees. It's about telling your employees really honestly how it's going to work.
Well, on that sensible note, I'd just like to ask you all to thank our panelists for a really exciting